Instead of calls for Canada to join the US, some Americans now want to join Canada.
We get to see the maple trees, maple sugar on the maple leaves. We get the biggest wheat fields growing tall. In Canada, where we see the reversing falls. In Canada, we get to see them all.
Hey everyone, welcome to the weekend edition of Canadian Drain. So, hot on the heels of the news of the dinner at Mar-a-Lago between Justin Trudeau and the Mango Mussolini, we heard about the apparent joke the old con made about annexing Canada and making Trudeau a governor. And one of the guests opined that Canada would be a very liberal state, to which the chump suggested splitting us in two, a conservative state and a liberal state. This is not the first time he's made this type of comment. Gerald Butts, a former senior advisor to Trudeau, said in a social media post on Tuesday that Trump used this 51st state line all the time with Trudeau in the first term, trying to rattle Canadian cages. And when someone wants to freak you out, don't, he cautioned. Even so, prior to contacting the Trudeau-elect on behalf of Canada's premiers, Trudeau warned Canadians that when Dumpty says these things, he means it.
One of the things that is really important to understand is that Donald Trump, when he makes statements like that, he plans on carrying them out. There's no question about it. Our responsibility is to point out that in this way he would be actually not just harming Canadians who work so well with the United States, he'd actually be raising prices for American citizens as well and hurting American industry and businesses. But there are ways for us to work together to demonstrate, as we did years before, that we can do things together. We can create opportunities and growth and good jobs on both sides of the border by being the partners and allies we've been for decades.
We can't completely blow it off as the ravings of a lunatic, since in the past he's made serious comments about buying Greenland or trading it for Puerto Rico. And whilst Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc, who attended the Mar-a-Lago dinner, insists that the Mango is only joking about annexing Canada, according to Politico, Canadian nationalists have long warned against the country becoming a 51st state. The topic came up amid tense national debate over continental free trade that dominated the 1988 Canadian election. And at the time, the free trade agreement between the US and Canada had been negotiated and signed by President Ronald Reagan. Well, past invasions into Canada have not ended well. 200 years ago, during the Revolutionary War, there were at least 3 attempts to invade and annex our country that was unsuccessful, with government buildings being burnt to the ground on both sides, and any land gained was given back. And in the aftermath, both the American and British fortified the border in preparation for future fighting, but tensions cooled relatively quickly. A grand reconciliation ball was even held on the Detroit frontier. The US and Canadian armies have not fought each other since and have become strong defense allies. Also, Canada is still within the British Commonwealth. We're one of the founding members of NATO, and we've recently had strategic dialogues with our Nordic allies. At the dinner, the interconnectedness and interdependence of the Canadian and US economies is the message Trudeau brought to the dinner table. And amid these threats of tariffs from the US, Canada has just signed a trade agreement with Indonesia, CEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, to bolster bilateral trade and a sustainable critical mineral and agricultural development.
Canada's Trade Minister, Mary Ng, has announced a new trade agreement with Indonesia that she says will foster bilateral trade between the two countries. The agreement was signed today in Jakarta and has been in the works for 3 years. Canada and Indonesia are seeking to strengthen economic ties by bringing down tariffs, enhancing supply chain access, and driving growth in several business sectors. It comes as countries across the world contemplate the impact Donald Trump's upcoming takeover could have on trade agreements between their countries and the United States.
And while less than 1% of migrants coming into the United States regularly come from Canada, and 0.2% of the fentanyl coming into the United States comes from Canada, Canadian officials have said there are plans to put more helicopters, drones, and law enforcement officers at the border. Not in supplication to the mega moron. This move comes in anticipation of an increase of people seeking to enter Canada from the U.S. However, instead of calls for Canada to join the U.S., McKercher said the sentiment seems to have flipped. Some Americans now want to join Canada. Recently, New York State Senator Liz Krueger even proposed that her state, as well as Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont, could secede from the U.S. and become Canadian provinces should Trump take office. And in other Canadian news this week, on the 35th anniversary of the mass shooting at the Polytechnique School in Montreal, where 14 women lost their lives, Canada has announced that it's including another 324 assault-style gun models to our list of over 1,500 makes and models that are prohibited.
Effective immediately, 324 unique makes and variants of what the government calls assault-style firearms are now prohibited.
Our goal is to ensure that no community, no family is devastated by mass shootings in Canada again.
These firearms join the list of more than 1,500 types of firearms Prime Minister Justin Trudeau banned the sale and use of in 2020, in the aftermath of the Nova Scotia mass shooting. As was the case 4 years ago, the government is offering owners and retailers of these newly outlawed guns amnesty until October 2025. It remains to be seen exactly how many firearms will be turned over in time, but once they are, the government says they have a plan to get them out of the country and potentially onto the front lines of the Russia-Ukraine war.
And on Friday, Canada announced its new Arctic strategy, which includes opening consulates and boosting security systems after Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Canada used to rely on these polar ice caps for safety, but now they're melting away at an alarming rate, opening up waterways for foreign countries. Ottawa says the heat has been on to come up with a new Arctic foreign policy.
Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine has led us all to ask, who's next?
And it's not just Moscow. China says it wants to become an Arctic power and was recently seen conducting military exercises near Alaska. That's concerning for Canada, now reinstating an ambassador to the Arctic, opening consulates in Greenland and Alaska, and vowing greater cooperation with territorial and indigenous leaders who warn of foreign interference on their doorstep.
So the old con can joke, bluster, and rattle his saber all he wants, but in the end, Canada will come out of this in an even stronger global position than before. So take off, eh, ya hoser? Do the like, do the subscribe, join our channel. We're growing. Thank you. Stay tuned for more on Political Drain, Canadian edition.